I have been practicing within Buddhist teachings for 19 years, and about 10 years ago I stumbled upon Luang Por Promote's teachings. And before Luang Por Promote, I spent a lot of time in Thailand, first of all, doing very, very still type meditation, right, where I would do Burmese style. So in the Burmese style is very, very strict, and you would sit and just hold, usually pay attention to your abdomen rising and falling, and then you would hold still, and sometimes the teacher would ask you, yesterday, how long did you sit for each sit? And you have to sit 12 hours a day, or walk and sit, like that. And I'd say, I could sit for 1 hour at a time without moving. And say, very good. Tomorrow, 1.5 hours. Oh boy. So then you do 1.5 hours, and you're very proud. I did it, 1.5 hours. Like, tomorrow, 2 hours, So it was a very strict practice. And there was also walking very, very slowly. Have any of you seen this or done this? Where you go to a temple and they make you lift your foot. Lifting, moving, lowering. Oops, forgot, wasn't paying attention. Okay, go back up. Forgot, lowering, trying to be paying attention to each movement. And so I would be in and out of temples doing that a long time ago. And I had some really nice experiences. I mean, we're talking major, painful, struggling experiences for most of it, and then the odd moment or the odd short segment that was really amazing and magical, and then 99% of it just painful, struggling, hating it, can't wait till I'm out, and imagining what I'm going to do when I finally get out of the retreat, and those types of things. And what I found would happen is that during the retreat, I would have these good experiences and my mind would calm down sometimes not so much. But then when I would leave the temple, I found that the teachings just didn't stick. I get excited about being out of temple, and it's like, who's gonna, you're working, and then you're meeting people, and you're social, and you're just living your life, have family and friends, and then it's like, okay, now for an hour I'm gonna walk like this, and it just became so difficult. It was too much of a contrast. You have to sort of calm down into that and slowly get into that and start to move slower. And so it's a nice practice, but I found it's just too hard to mesh with regular daily life practice. And so I did a lot of seeking, and then I started seeking in healing energies and the psychic realms and things like that. So I did a lot of work practicing in the psychic realms and refining meditative states and energetic states to do different types of healing and for energy work and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed that, and I thought that might be the best thing to do, is to become really bright and shiny and powerful and know things and help people. And I thought, well, maybe that's more practical in daily life than to move everything really slowly and just keep the mind still. And then I started listening to Luang Por Promote's teachings. Somebody was playing the CD, and I started hearing him talking about different things that I always wondered when I was practicing. Like, for example, when I was holding my mind still and trying to pay attention just to the abdomen or just to that foot moving and these things, when I was doing that, I was thinking, the teacher's telling me to do this, but yet when I read about this practice, from the master in Burma, it says, if you're thinking, know that you're thinking. If you feel worried, know that you feel worried. And then once the worry goes away or the thinking goes away, then continue your movement. And then if you're thinking again, know that you're thinking, and you can repeat thinking, worry, until it disappears. And then you continue the movement. And so I was looking at that, and I'm thinking to myself, and this was in the retreat, backing up, I was thinking to myself, I can't stop thinking. This is what I was thinking to myself. I cannot stop thinking. So how do you wait until the thinking disappears and then start moving and then continue paying attention? It's like, if I'm going to follow these teachings correctly, even though I'm going to just ignore the teacher here in the Burmese style, and what I'm going to do is go with their master. And if he says, just say thinking if you're thinking, or just say worry if you're worrying, and whatever state comes up, just say it until it disappears, and then continue. That's what I'm going to do. And this was in one of the retreats. So I just went, I had a lot of energy from a lot of practice for a couple of weeks of doing the practice, so I had a lot of energy. Like, okay, I'm just going to do it. Thinking, analyzing, then I'm thinking, when am I ever going to get back to walking? I was walking at the time. It's like, you know what, I'll just stop walking, and I'm just going to label everything. Forget about the walking. He says it's got to disappear before you walk, not walking. And so I just stood there and facing a wall, like this, and just thinking, analyzing. Should I start walking now? Unsure, curious, analyzing, thinking, worrying, unsure. Then I started noticing that I paid attention to a sound. So it was like hearing. Then my attention went down to my foot. And I noticed probably from the practice of doing the walking so much, it just automatically went down to my foot, the attention. I noticed it. And I was like, oh, I didn't know what to call it. Unsure. And then thinking, analyzing. And I just didn't move. And it was about an hour and a half. And I just kept labeling it. Thinking, analyzing, worrying, unsure, talking, hating. And I just kept repeating this to myself. So what started happening when I did that, all of a sudden what happened was a separation happened where I saw my body, or I felt my body sitting there, but it didn't feel like my body anymore. It felt like a robot or a rag doll, just sitting there like this, like some sort of creature. And the mind separated out, or the consciousness separated out, and it was still saying all this stuff, and watching this stuff. But the body completely separated in such a way that it was completely obvious that I'm not this body. And in fact, because the concentration was strong at that time, it was like, I don't even need this body. Like, this is completely uninteresting now. And I said to myself, okay, I get how this practice works. You just keep noticing what happens in your mind from moment to moment, and then the body shows itself as not being you. And then I know from the theory in Buddhism, so then I guess what happens is you keep noticing, and then maybe the mind will separate out, and you see that the mind isn't you, and the emotions aren't you either, because in Buddhism we have the doctrine of non-self, that none of this stuff is you. So I guess you just keep noticing until the body separates out, because now the body was, at that time, the body was so separate that I felt like I could jump off a building and it wouldn't matter. The mind would still be there. That has since changed as you come back into daily life. And then it was like, okay, well, so I guess you just keep noticing, and then I bet you the mind then reveals itself as not you either, and then you're done. Oh, that was loud. And then you're done. That's the practice. It's like, okay, I get it. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. And then so I didn't continue. So I figured I'll just continue tomorrow, and I'll get it. I'll enlighten. No problem. That was my thought. Well, I spent the next week or so on the retreat trying to do it. Wouldn't happen. I couldn't even separate the body out anymore. Right? And then after a while, I forgot about that experience because none of the teachers seemed to teach that. Until one day, much later, I was listening to this CD that my friend was playing of Luang Por Promote, and he started talking about notice things from moment to moment. As you keep noticing, the body will separate. You keep noticing, and then the mind will separate. And then bing, I remembered that experience from my earlier retreat, and I thought, this teacher knows. This teacher understands. And so at the time I was getting a master's degree in Buddhist studies in Bangkok. And then I thought to myself, as soon as I finish the degree, I'm moving to Sriracha where he lives, and I'm going to study with him. And so that's what I did. And so now I've been in Sriracha for the last 9 years or so practicing with Luang Por Promote. And what he primarily teaches is, if you want to see the truth of the way things are, which is what the Buddha teaches us to do, is you have to be able to become self-aware on a sort of moment-to-moment basis. And then you start to uncover the truth of the way things are. So there are a couple of things I want to mention about this. One is that you don't have to do it in that insane way that I was doing it on the retreat. You don't have to know every moment what is happening. In fact, you can't know every moment, and you'll just drive yourself insane. But slowly but surely you build up a habit of knowing, in that moment I caught the mind was lost in thought. Oh, in that moment I noticed I'm angry and was mulling something over and angry. oh, in this moment there was some frustration or anxiety coming up, right? Every once in a while, you forget about it for a while, and then it's like you come to, like you have a lucid moment, an awakening moment, where it's like, oh, I have a body, there's a body here, and it's breathing and it's sitting, but I had no idea, right? Like you guys now, sometimes busy listening and interested in what I'm saying, and then there's a body sitting here, but you had no idea, right? So that's sort of lost in listening. Not bad, we're just becoming aware of it, right? We just become aware of it. So definitely, please listen, but we can start to notice that, when I'm listening intently, I forget that I have a body. You can't do both at the same time. One moment you're listening, the next moment you might know you have a body, then the next moment you might have to come out to listen again. Then in another moment, you have to mull over what I said to understand it, right? Because you can't simultaneously be listening to me and knowing what I mean. You have to go in and interpret the words. It's even if it's your language. If it's not your language, it's more obvious. You have to go in and translate it a little bit in your mind. It's a little more obvious, right? But even if it is your native tongue that I'm speaking, you still have to, you listen and then figure it out, listen, comment on it, listen, right? It's not just listening. The mind is moving around. So here, to start uncovering the truth, you don't have to be aware in every moment, but you sort of come to or awaken to what the mind has just done a moment ago. Every once in a while, right? Not every moment. If you do it every moment, then you're going to be too tight, too tense, not happy, not relaxed, and not letting it happen naturally. This has to be a very natural, comfortable practice, not intrusive, where you're like, okay, never mind the thinking, never mind what I do, just see what I'm doing. Not like that, right? Just relax, be natural. If you're naturally a busy thinker, then let it be a busy thinker. If you're naturally a very relaxed, tame person, let it be that way. If you're naturally controlled, holding back, holding in, then let it be that way. Just let it be how it naturally is. And then you come to start seeing every moment, every once in a while, in a moment, how the body is, or what the body's doing, or how the mind is, what the mind's doing. You wake up to it. Because what we're doing now, generally in our lives, is, although we might think, we might consider ourselves smart or intelligent, we might consider ourselves an aware person, I know what's going on, we'll come to see that we actually aren't aware at all. We're aware conceptually of things, but we're so busy in the concepts, and we're not actually there in being able to be aware of what the mind is doing or what the body is doing from moment to moment. Okay? So for example, we're all breathing. Every one of us who's been sitting, we've been sitting relatively still, but not totally still. We've been tilting our head, we've been nodding, right? The odd scratch, the odd adjustment, the odd twiddle of the fingers, right? But these things go unnoticed generally. Why do they go unnoticed? Because we're spending our time in the concepts, in the ideas. So we're immersed in our bias, in our perspective, in our sense of self. And the truth is, beyond bias, there isn't a self. The truth is that there's just phenomena. One thing happening, then another thing happening, then another thing happening. Things happening and emerging. But none of it is actually personal. They're not they're not happening within a person. They're just happening. And that's very important to be able to see. It stems from the Buddhist teachings, but it's very important for all of us to see. It doesn't matter what we believe or what we like. It's important to see because in all of the attempts that we have to make ourselves feel more satisfied, to feel happier, to feel more peaceful, to be more comfortable in our lives, in all of it, we're sort of missing the main way or the main method to be happy. What we try to do, unfortunately, is have us get a state of happiness, like for example, we're making the amount of money we want, we've got the job we want, we have the people, the family, and the love and the life that we like, and we just want it to stay like that. and then we should be good, and then maybe we'll have some fun and exciting things to do, and that'll also be good, and okay, and then just keep it like that, and then we hope that life is going to be good and happy, right? But think about, and then you can all sort of mull that over, right? Like when you think about how to be happy, it's often like, okay, I want this amount of love, this amount of money, this type of career, a plan for the future, a purpose in life, something important to do for some of you, or lots of entertainment disposable to you at any time, so you can always be distracted and enjoying, not have to wait, not have to feel anxious. You can always depend on this or that. So what we end up doing here is we end up having a very unreliable type of happiness. We end up having what I call happiness on stilts, which means that we're like teetering on, okay, as long as I've got this person in my life and this person, this job, this amount of money, this good Wi-Fi, and all these aspects, then yeah, I'm good, right? But now you pull one of those stilts away, in some cases, like a tragedy, like this person dies or is sick, or me, diagnosed with cancer, right? Or all these natural things that are going to happen to everybody, not necessarily cancer, but difficult times, tragic things, car accident, an illness, a fever, right? Difficult relationship issues and fights and job problems, right? All these things are happening. And so at any moment, we're so fragile, right? At any moment, there's something we can pull away from your life or from our lives that will then take away the happiness. Sometimes it's just even the Wi-Fi. You're happy, doodly-doo, and then, what? What the heck? Come on, right? Even at least for a few moments or a few minutes, right? All the happiness is gone. You're not proud of your job or your relationship anymore, right? For that moment, all there is hating, right? Hating or disliking in that time. So it's unreliable, the type of happiness that we're craving in the world. Sense, desire, happiness, basically, is an unreliable type of happiness. There's a much easier, much more reliable type of happiness. Seeing the truth of what's really going on. And the truth of what's really going on, not a belief, just the truth, if you actually see things as they actually are, not through concept, thought, belief, or faith, but just see them as they actually are in one's own body and mind. The truth is that none of these things are a self. Once you see that there isn't a self, or slowly but surely have more moments where you're able to see that there isn't a self, all the weight of wanting this self to be happy, comfortable, have a good job, have fun, keep excitement going, whatever it is that you're into or you rely on, all of that weight drops off immediately along with the idea of a self. Right? So, in short, no self, no problem. Right? Very simple, but what you have to understand is this isn't a method of trying to convince you that you should now think in terms of no self. Not at all. Keep thinking in terms of a self, because we don't want to change that. That's how we think. That's our conditioning. What we need to do instead is just learn this practice of mindfulness that Luang Pa Pramod is teaching, and that I'm helping to with some of my experience, going to help to get you guys moving in your mindfulness practice. And then through mindfulness, you start to get insights and see the truth that there isn't a self. You start to get that unbiased perspective. Your mind or consciousness wakes up out of whatever it is you're engaged in. And then you're able to see, like from an unbiased perspective, a little, almost as if separate from your thoughts, separate from your feelings, separate from the body, and just see them as things at a distance, rather than seeing them as personal. Right? And then even that consciousness that separates out and is able to see things, that isn't some big grand self like a lot of spiritual teachers say, are mistaken in fact. It's not some big grand self with a capital S. That consciousness as well is just a moment-to-moment experience. One moment it's busy thinking, one moment it's busy hearing, the next moment it's a busy awake and aware and separate. It's also something that's moving, well, it's more technically arising and falling in each moment as well. So that isn't a self either. So we once we continue to be able to see in any particular moment what it is that the body and mind is doing, we can start to have this separate experience, and then from this separate unbiased experience, independent of thought, we'll clearly see this truth that there isn't a self, clearly see the truth that there's just phenomena arising and falling that are impersonal. So what I'm going to do is help us a little bit individually, maybe with a quote-unquote meditation, kind of a loose. You can see I'm not a very, like, you know, I mean, I've done some very deep meditation successfully in my life, but I don't try to hold to it or keep it. I just let it be natural and flow. And so I want to do sort of a meditation with you, but I don't want to imply that we're going to now hold and keep our mind really still or steady or try to make ourselves better or happier in some way, because we're not looking to have, that's temporary, right? As long as we're still keeping a self and trying to make it happy, then we're not going to get this wisdom that there isn't a self, right? We're just trying to find another way to make the mind happy temporarily. And that's not really what we're after. We're after the wisdom, the non-self wisdom. So let's do a bit of a meditation, quote unquote, in the sense that we're going to let ourselves be normal and natural, but I'm going to help us to become aware of our own body and mind. Sound good? Even if it doesn't sound good, it's all I got planned. So.
Sounds good.
So Rhoda, can you notice that you get happy and then you get nervous? You notice that?
Very excited.
Excited? Oh, thank you. Yeah. So you move between happy and then nervous. Can you see that?
And then when I'm aware of the excitement and nervous, then there's this brief moment of peace. And then it gets
Good.
back to happiness and excited. And oh my God,
It's really not that big of a deal. But thank you. That's very nice of you. So generally with this practice, which I think a lot of you have heard before, is it's helpful when you do sort of a quote-unquote meditation to have a main object, because it's really hard to know what the mind is doing other than just thinking. It's hard to know what the mind is doing if you don't have a main object from which you're able to see what the mind goes and does, like what the mind goes and does from there. Otherwise, it's just, okay, now I'm thinking about this, now I'm thinking about that, now what do I do? I don't know. Like it's hard to gauge what to do. So you need like a main spot for the mind, not to hold it or be peaceful with it. That's one of the misunderstandings a lot of the time. If you hold it and try to stay peaceful with it, it's hard. But those of you that are good at it, it's nice. It's a nice, comfortable, temporary rest. It's a recommended nice thing to do. Like instead of binge watching a series, you might watch one and then do some meditation. Like it's a nice thing to do with your time, but it isn't the way that we're preaching here, the way to insight. So what we need instead is we have this main object, but only so that we can see what the mind does from there, not so that we can hold the attention at the main object. So what is a main object? So some of you have already done this stuff. So a main object can be the breath, like you're paying attention to the breath a little bit at the nostril. It can be the breath moving. It can be like the body moving as a result of the breath. It can just be the body sitting. Like you can just, whatever posture you're in, you can just notice that the body's sitting. For some of you, it can be a word, like a mantra, but not the mantra in the sense of trying to stay peaceful with it. You know, like there are lots of different mantras. In Thailand, they like to use Buddho. Like Buddho, Buddho, Buddho. But, you know, the approach for wisdom isn't the approach of trying to, like, lull your mind into a daze. You know, not like Buddho. You know, nothing like that to put it into a tense phase. But just to have it there. Like, so in your mind, it's like Buddha, 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 Buddha. So then you'll notice your mind will do other stuff, right? It will stop thinking. It'll forget about Buddha. It'll go think about something else. And then you can gauge that. You can see, oh, a moment ago it was Buddhaing. Now it's off worrying about something. Or now it's off thinking about what I'm going to do later. Who I'm going to tell about this. Or, you know, oh, this is like that person's teaching. Or, you know, it's off comparing or something. You can start to notice the behavior, the antics of the mind from the Buddha. So it's best to just pick something, doesn't matter what it is, because it's not the actual object that we care about, just somewhere from which we gauge the mind. So you just are, if you have one that you like already, then you can use it. If you don't have one, then either just pick the body kind of sitting and breathing, or pick just going in your mind, Buddha, 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 Buddha. Buddha means awakened one, which is nice because that's what we'd like to be. But it's just a word. I mean, you can just as easily use sandwich, unless it makes you go dreaming about the type of sandwich, and you don't want to be doing that. But something sort of neutral to a little happy, like something you enjoy repeating in your mind. But nothing you're too attached to. And then you have that there, so you can see what the mind does from there. So you'll notice that if you have that object, then what happens now is, when I'm speaking, sometimes the mind will feel like it moves towards me, or moves to what I'm saying, right? But, right? So if there's a noise like that, then what'll happen is you might notice that the attention, whoop, it jumped off of the meditation object that you used, and there might have even been a startled feeling, or a, what was that? You know, this type of feeling that happened, right? So you can notice if that happened. And if nothing happened, like when I make a strange noise, if nothing happened, then just try to notice to see, am I really holding? Am I trying to stay still inside? Because naturally, we should have movement. We're not enlightened beings. We have movement when there's a certain sound. Your attention will either go there or go there for a moment, start analyzing it or thinking about it. It's just naturally what the mind will do. So if your mind's not doing that, it's because you're trying to be good, trying to be right, and holding yourself together. That's unnatural. So just, if you're doing that, be aware that that's what's happening. And that's not the correct practice. But you don't have to try to do too much to stop it. Just being aware of it is plenty. You can just be aware. You're Thai, right? So มีกันทรายมีทรายสภาวะเห็นไหมดึงเข้ามาแล้ว Okay. Just saying that one phenomenon that can happen in the mind is looking for what to notice. That's a phenomenon. If you can catch yourself doing that, right? So the goal is you have your main object and then you notice whatever you got caught in. Whatever the mind was engaged in. So in this case, just for a moment, the mind was engaged in, what do I look for? Kind of like this. What do I, right? So that's a phenomenon of mind. You just notice, oh, it was looking for what to know or what to be mindful of. Right? That's what it was doing in that moment. So you can become aware that it was doing that. Do you know the cause of that? มันเกิดจากอะไรรู้ไหมครับกันสาย What creates the mind looking?
Trying to see.
Yeah, there has to be a wanting first, or a like wanting to know, wanting to see. So there's the wanting, and then the mind goes out to look for something. Yeah, it's wanting to be good, wanting to be right, or wanting to catch it, wanting to be mindful. Now, when the mind is wanting to catch it or wanting to be mindful, the trick is just notice the wanting, and you're done. You're done for that moment. Then you can just come back to the main object, relax, don't have to do anything. And then the mind will go do something else all by itself. It'll just start thinking, start tightening, start wondering. It'll just start doing something. And then hopefully you can then, after that happens, you can just notice, oh, that's what it just did. It just did that. So who am I interrupting now? Who is just thinking something? And you notice that you're just thinking something? Lost in thought, right? So you forgot about your meditation object, right? That you had one, but then it was gone for a while. So that moment where you realize, like, oh yeah, right? Where you're just lost in thinking something. That moment, that's a moment of mindfulness. That's what you're after, right? So you want to get lost in thought, in a sense, so that you can see that you got lost in thought. Right? That's the important moment. The staying still and aware and knowing the breath, it's nice. It's a nice rest, but it's not the wisdom we're after. The wisdom we're after will come by noticing that we got lost in thought, and then again, and then again, and then maybe noticing that you're listening, right? And then lost in, so you're busy listening, busy thinking. Sometimes seeing, right? You can look at me. What's happening automatically, in fact, when I'm talking, is that you'll move between looking at me, thinking, and listening to me. And they'll all happen separately. There'll be a moment of looking, and then it gets blurry, and you're busy thinking. And then hearing. When you're hearing, you're not seeing, right? There's a moment of each. It goes very, very fast. One to the other, to the other. Forgetting this. Was it Kelly? Is that your name? Yes. You're noticing. Are you noticing that there are moments of happiness coming up? Are you noticing the happiness? Yeah. There. Just one happened again. It's a moment of.
I wasn't thinking it was happiness, but
yeah.
More like content.
Okay. Good.
Peaceful.
And content. Yeah. Okay. That's the way I see. I mean, just a word, right? But what was happening was you were starting to notice when the mind would drift off. And then you become aware. Each time that you become aware that the mind has drifted off, there's a moment where the mind sort of is able to see what the mind did. And in that moment, there's just a bit of a letting go, just for a moment that happens. And then the letting go doesn't last long. It lets go for a moment, then it comes back and adheres to an object or goes back into thought, right? And then if there's another recognition of, oh yeah, it's busy thinking about that, then it gets happy again. And it releases from the thought. And so it's sort of happy or peaceful, whatever, in small moments, but each moment that we become aware that we were busy thinking, there's another moment of happiness that happens as consciousness is normally stuck in thought and stuck in emotion and stuck in what we're doing, and it gets a moment where it's seen, and it's like, oh, and it drops it just for a moment. It lets go of the world, in a sense. It lets go of whatever it's engaged in, just for a moment, and it's light and it's free. I can see it in your auras when you have one of those moments. I can usually, not always, but I can sometimes pick it up in your aura where you dropped something, you recognized what you were doing, you dropped it, and it got light and bright for a moment. And then it picks the thing back up again. You can notice it. It's freeing. But when you're new at it, it's just a very slight moment. Someone might have to point it out to you to see that happiness comes up or that peacefulness comes up. Yeah. But now it's a little bit tighter. You notice how you might be trying harder now? I'm not sure, but it got a little bit tighter. So it's a little less, you notice it's a little less comfortable than it was a moment ago in the chest? Can you notice that? Yeah, it's like a little bit, yeah, because trying. There's some trying going on. So you just sort of just let it be natural, let it be loose, let your mind get lost in thought, but have sort of a sense of the body or a sense of a main object there, but then you let the mind get lost in thought, and then you know that it did, right? And then you get happy again. Hi. Yeah. That's right. You need to notice. Can you sense that there's a vibration in the lower chest? Can you sense it? This is like the mind, like I startled it, right? So because I startled it, it's sort of like the mind inside is moving around, going around like this. You can notice that? Yeah. Good. So what are you choosing as a main object? Anything? Yeah, because it's just sort of out there, right? So pick something. Like it doesn't even have to be something that's normally meditative. Like it just be this. Doesn't matter. Like you just put I do this a lot actually. Just put my finger like this, right? And so my main object is just paying attention to this feeling, this contact on the tip of my finger, right? You just do that. And so you pay attention there, right? But it's impossible to keep your attention there. It's impossible. It'll move to something else, right? And then when it does, you just kind of become aware that it did, right? Just try that for a bit. Yeah, I'm going to wake you up. I'll do my best. You'll wake yourself up. I'll just point the way a little bit. Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it, Rhoda? Because there can actually be a little pain here, but you can forget about it. You can totally forget about it, right? There's gaps where you don't recognize the feeling here. Understand?
I can feel the movement of the mind here, and as I usually use the awareness of the breath,
Mm-hmm.
before I over-focus on the in and out of the air through the nostrils, and then lately I feel just a general feeling, but then the mind gets lost easier than this.
Lost easy is okay. Yeah, it's not a problem. This is it's like an experiment, not to do it too long or too much, but sometimes it's easy to see the difference that the mind goes out and now, it's back there now. Now it's gone from there. Now it's back there. Have you ever heard of the Buddhist middle way? Have you heard of that term, the middle way in Buddhism? So the middle way in Buddhism is, very simply put, there's two extremes. There's one extreme and another extreme. So the middle way is between the two extremes. And the two extremes are, one is self-control, holding, trying to be good, trying to get stuff right, trying to keep the mind still, not being evil, or not, following a negative, bad mind, and trying to hold the mind good, all the self-help stuff. That's the direction of the controlling direction, or the keeping inward type direction. So staying still, staying stuck on a meditation object kind of thing, right? Or staying stuck on a mantra. The self-help direction, holding control direction. And then the other extreme is just following whatever thoughts come up. Okay, I want to do this, I like doing that, you're mean, like getting angry at people, getting totally lost in I want to buy this, I want to do that, and then going and doing it, right? That's the other extreme, is being, in all these impurities come up in our hearts, like lust and greed and wanting this and that, and anger and frustration, and then just being a slave to it all, just having no self-control at all. That's the complete opposite, right? So there's the two total extremes. And the middle way between the two extremes isn't being in moderation. Okay, I'll eat, but not all of it, or I'll have a brownie, but just a slice. Like, that's not the middle way. It's not moderation. What the middle way is when the mind goes out into the thoughts and has lost control and just totally a slave to whatever's happening. We become aware. We become mindful of that. We know so, that that's what happened. The mind goes into control and try to be better and try to be good. We also know so. So when the mind goes in to hold or control, we know so. We try to recognize that that's what happened. When the mind goes out and lost in the stories and the thoughts and the impurities of mind and all that, then we know so. So the middle way emerges on its own from being aware of the two extremes, the mind moving back and forth between the two extremes. But the extremes can be subtle just in our experience. So if we have our finger like this, for example, one moment the mind is stuck to the finger, it's controlling, it's keeping the attention there. And the next moment, the mind's off, oh, what do I want to do tomorrow, right? It forgets about the finger, it's just off, a slave to whatever thought came in, and off it goes with whatever thought came in, right? So that's the other extreme. So the middle way is being that observer or separate observer consciousness, which is actually in technical terms called samadhi, or correct samadhi, is the mind that is able to see or become aware. The mind goes off, out of control, we know so. Held in control, we know so. We notice, or we notice that happened. We notice that happened. So it's more knowing than doing, right? All the doing, your mind is going to do. There's no stopping the mind from doing. So it's about just knowing what it did. Liking. Right. Thinking. Yeah. Nodding. Yeah. So you just become aware. Now pulling in. Just moment to moment to moment. Yeah. One moment, another moment. Good? Happy? Yeah. Enjoying? Starting to understand? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Your mind is happier and more awake than it was when you sat down. Do you know that? Can you tell that? Yeah? You notice you moved your head? Yeah. See that? See how it gets happy when it notices that? You see that? That's the moment of awareness. In Thai, you speak Thai, right? Okay, so pretty well? Perfectly, excellent. เหมือนตอนเห็นสภาวะตอนเห็นสิ่งที่เกิดขึ้นเมื่อกี้จิตมันหลุดจากสภาวะมันวางแต่มันวางชั่วคราวแป๊บเดียวแล้วก็หยิบมาใหม่ตอนมันวางมันโล่งโปร่งเบาสบายสามารถเห็นความจริงจากมุมนั้น So just saying that when the mind when we see what the mind was just doing, we free ourselves from what it was doing from a moment ago. And the mind is light, bright, happy for a moment. And then, because we're used to it, goes in and grabs the next thought. So lost in thought? You notice that? Yeah. Yeah, good.
Very subtle. Sometimes I notice it. Sometimes just, I don't know that I'm noticing it. And I realize I'm noticing the shimmer on the light on the tile and the anchor.
Right.
Kind of focus on our.
Yeah, you'll notice if it gets uncomfortable, then that's not the correct practice. It should never be uncomfortable. It will get uncomfortable sometimes, but we can just know that there's something wrong, in a sense, when it gets uncomfortable. But you don't have to fix anything. You can just, if it's tight, you can just know that it got tight. If you want to know what you're doing wrong, you can just know that you feel unsure. Right? So just whatever's actually there in any moment, you just sort of come to recognize, become self-aware, which maybe we're starting to notice that generally we're not self-aware. We're only aware in the stories, but we don't know what we're actually engaged in, like engaged in feeling unsure, engaged in feeling uncomfortable, or engaged in holding ourselves back or feeling tight. Right? Usually we're just busy in the story about it. So there's only a moment that you can notice the shimmer of the tile, and then it'll go and think about it and talk about it. It's not actually seeing. You only see for a moment, and then after that moment we make a mental impression and start talking to ourselves about it. So you can notice that. Seeing just happens for a moment, and then we're back inside our intellect again.
I feel like I'm cheating by having an object.
You feel like you're
I feel like
cheating.
I'm cheating. Like, why should I have an object? Why can't I do this without it?
Yeah, the cheating's good. Cheating's good. Yeah, cheating's good. The reason why is because when we don't have a main object, usually what happens is we're just out at all the objects. So we're bouncing from one to the other rather than seeing that our mind moves to them. This is going to be something you'll understand better experientially later as you keep going with the practice. When we see the mind sort of moving towards the object is when the mind will not move towards the object and it'll become that separate observer. So when we have a mind that is this separate observing presence, then it's able to see the truth that there isn't a self. But when it's bouncing from object to object, going along with object to object like this, then we just sort of get engaged about the object. We might learn about the object, but we don't learn the truth of non-self. So it's a matter of needing this separate perspective. So we have to be able to see the mind that moves to objects, like moves to see, moves to hear, moves to think. And in order to be able to see that, it's helpful to have like our mantra or the body or breath, and then we see, oh, it's not with the breath anymore. Right? So for example, when you're walking down the street, right, generally it's hard to remember to be aware, right? Because we're busy thinking about what to do, or we're looking out at that, or where we're going, or looking at our phone, or remembering something, right? We generally forget to be mindful. Well, so how do you be mindful when you're walking down the street? Pay attention to the body walking as your main object, in a sense. Pay attention to the body walking. What's going to happen? You're not used to doing that. So what's going to happen is in a few seconds, maybe even 1 second, you'll forget that the body's walking, right? And you'll be engaged in thinking about something. Well, how do you become aware then? Well, you can notice that you forgot about the body walking. Right? You can be aware that there is a body and I had no idea. There was a body that turned left. I was right. The body that turned left and you had no idea that it did, right? Or the body nodded, or it reached to grab something, but it was so busy wanting that it went to grab it, you didn't even notice the arm moving. You're just out at the object, right? So you pay attention, you can pay attention to the body moving throughout the day, moving, shifting, turning, walking down the street, and then you notice that, oh, now it's not paying attention to the body. There might be a huge gap. It might be a few seconds, it might be a few hours. It's like, oh yeah, what happened? I was going to be paying attention to the body, right? But you're able to have that gauge, that it was in one place and now it's in another place, right? It was at the body, now it's thinking. Sure.
What does it mean when the mind is stagnant?
Stagnant.
Yeah, because
Your mind's not stagnant.
oh, mine. Because that's a comment that I got from the last report with
Ajahn.
Ajahn.
Okay, another guy that's better than me.
You're very good too. So, I've been observing. I try to understand what stagnation of the mind means.
When the mind is stagnant.
Over-focusing.
Yeah, often if there's over-focusing or trying too hard, it's like we're holding the mind in place. And so then it doesn't move naturally. The mind should move naturally between thinking, seeing, hearing, occasionally smelling, only if there's a foul smell or something really strong. But it should be moving naturally between these things. So a mind that's stagnant is one that's being held unnaturally, controlled unnaturally. And sometimes when we control the mind unnaturally, we're holding to a meditation object too much, and then we go back out into the world, we're not natural anymore. Right? We think we've changed, but in like a day, that'll all be over, and we'll just be back to normal. But really, it's like holding. It's like we had a meditation object. And then we finish in the world, and I'll have a coffee. Oh, here you go. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm good. I'm peaceful. You know, inside the mind is kind of like holding this space. Secretly, it's going, keep it like this, I'm happier, it's good, don't change. Stay like this, don't change, right? It's not letting the natural truth that everything changes and moves, arises and falls. It's not allowing that to happen, you see.
I think because last time when I recorded you mentioned about I should let the mind go free a little bit, but I stopped doing sitting meditation, so I stopped for like 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
And then
Brave.
Yeah, that's the thing that you reminded me that then that comes the fear of losing control, and that it came, and then I started to feel confused a bit, and so, and then I met as I met, and then you said, your mind is too stagnant.
Too stagnant. So you weren't letting it free.
Fear, and then I'm like, I need to practice more again.
Okay. So then he was saying that you weren't letting your mind free enough? Was it in front of him? Were you trying to hold it good?
I want to practice well in front of him.
That happens a lot. I do the same thing in front of like Luang Pa Pramod, and then your mind's like this, and Luang Pa will say, "Oh, you're trying too hard," or your mind's pang. Like they'll say that pang is the Thai word, sort of meaning over-focused or held in place, holding your mind in place. Didn't pang as much as before. Yeah, so there's improvement. Yeah. Even in front of him when you were holding, it still was better. So that's good.
So your recommendation?
Well, you seem pretty close to natural now. Just holding back a little bit, but mostly pretty natural. Yeah. You have to let yourself be free. You have to let, at least internally. You don't have to say everything that you think and, be like that. But you have to internally own whatever it is that's in there. You have to allow it to be there. So even if there's angry states or really frustrated, mean, horrible person things that you think or say, you have to, don't say it, don't be mean, be kind and be good and respectable in society, but internally you have to let these things come up. You can't hold them down and push them and keep them hidden from yourself, right? In order to do this practice, you have to be able to allow the emotions to flow naturally. So allow anger to come up, but try not to hurt anybody with it. Just keep it personal, keep it to yourself, right? Allow anger to come up, allow worry to come up. Try not to suppress, try not to hold back. Let it free inside. And then get familiar with it, right? Get to see, that's what anger's like. That's what sadness is like. And even suppression, right? That's what holding back is like. I'm not letting my heart open. I'm not letting it free. Get to see these different states. Because when you see these different states internally, then what happens is your mind builds a habit of getting very familiar with them, being able to recognize them quickly when they arise, right? So anger starts to happen, the mind immediately realizes, there's anger, right? So when you're in traffic and you're like, come on, go, why won't you just move, this kind of thing. What's with Bangkok, oh my gosh, right? Instead of just doing that, like you start to go, why is and then you can feel this anger coming up. The mind sees this anger because it's used to seeing it. You practice seeing it again and again. It sees the anger, and then the anger just disappears immediately. So then the mind is light, bright, and happy. It frees itself of the anger. And then there's still the traffic. There still might be somebody angry at you or all this stuff, but it doesn't cause a whole internal struggle anymore. You put that down. And then because we're new, we pick it back up. right? So we put it down as a moment of freedom. We start thinking about it again, maybe we get angry again. Then we know it again, then it drops away again, right? We start to see that things come and they go, and they come and then they go. They arise and then they fall away. But we have to let it be natural in order to see the natural truth. Yeah. Anybody have any questions? Anybody? Yeah, sure. Anybody? Is anybody a meditation practitioner? Like practice meditation regularly, other than Rhoda? So you have a few times. Okay. So you want to ask a question first, and then we'll.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was convinced that, well, personally, I think my personality is I'm a pleaser.
Uh-huh.
So, and I work in marketing. So,
Okay.
when, for example, when I meet Ajahn Prasan,
Uh-huh.
he said I interfere, I manipulate my mind to be sweet, but deep down I'm not.
Not sweet. He's a great teacher.
But and he said this is not a good habit.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering, like, because I work in marketing, sometimes I don't like my client, I don't
Oh,
like my
okay.
boss,
Mhm.
but like you said, we are not allowed to say, trying to be sweet. Sometimes I kind of make myself think of good things.
How many people know her? Do you all know her? Oh, just a few? Is she really sweet? Does she act sweet? Okay. It's not real.
Deep down, sometimes,
Just joking. I'm just from what Ajahn Prasan said, that's all.
Yeah.
So
He said that's not a good habit to do, but I think
okay, but I
it's a
think
habit.
I think what he means by it not being a good habit is you have to recognize that you're doing it. So you really think it's you being sweet when you're doing it.
No,
right?
but I kind of know that I manipulate myself a little bit.
Yes.
For example, if I'm angry, I try to make myself think of good thing. Try to make myself a little bit more sweet.
There you go.
When I ask
So that's the bad
myself,
habit, yeah. So it's not don't get him wrong, it's not a bad habit to be nice and sweet to people.
Right.
That's a nice thing to be.
Yes.
But what he means is internally, if you want to see the truth, it's a bad habit to try to fix and change what you're feeling.
Right.
Yeah, if you want to see the truth. So it's not a bad habit to be kind and sweet. We have to act like we have to act in society, right? We can't, there's rules, and you don't be mean to people, and you be kind, and that
Because
type of
in
thing.
marketing, when people call, I have to like.
Mhm. Oh, okay. Well, that was extra sweet. Yeah.
So yeah,
Good.
so I get into the habit of manipulating myself.
Mhm.
But it's
Yeah. So
every day.
the only problem is if you miss it, if you don't notice that you're doing that. Yeah. So just see that it's Hong Prong. That it's you have to be able to see your own mask that you're putting on.
Sometimes see it. Even I do that to my cat. I want my cat to like me. And then-
Well, who
I feel
doesn't,
like-
really? Yeah.
I feel like this is really not me. I kind of like in a play.
Yeah.
I'm this cell with my dad, so with my cat.
Mhm.
Kind of like.
Got it.
I feel like I'm fake all the time, not really me.
Yeah, yeah. As long as you recognize that you're faking it,
Yeah.
right? As long as you recognize it, then you just keep recognizing. Okay? When you keep recognizing, what'll happen is you'll start to see the motivating factor in the background will start to emerge. So you'll see some of the fear, right? You'll start to see some of the fear, and you might see some suppression, like you're feeling upset, and then you might notice that your mind pushes the upset down and then tries to talk over top. Like you feel angry, and a lot of people do this with their children, when they have children, right? And they're feeling very angry, and they're like, "No, put that down. No, don't bother that person. Come on over here." But inside it's, right? That's what's really going on in there. But right? So you have to be able to. So slowly but surely, when you notice the mask, then it'll back up a bit, and the real stuff, or the real sadness inside, or the "please like me," or "nobody likes me," or whatever is really hiding in there, will start to emerge. And we need to let all that stuff up so that we can see it, right? We need to hide it. Otherwise, if we're not doing that, then we have this fake self that is managing everything. right? We have to just let all this natural stuff start to emerge and come up so that we can see the impersonal truth of each emotion that arises. Yeah. Good. See, you're welcome. You're even trying to look good by understanding and answering. There's even this.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's always something behind, all my actions.
Right. There's like a motivation.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, you get more and more familiar with that, right? You just reflect on it for a moment. Like you just look back on. Okay, you say like, okay, ขอบคุณค่ะ, and then you walk away and then you notice, yes, that was phony. Like, you just reflect on it for one moment after it happens. Like, you can feel like, just a moment ago, there was something unnatural, right? And then you'll start to, you might feel sad about it. And then you can notice the sadness starting to arise. And you notice that it's not quite comfortable anymore, that it was more comfortable a moment ago and it's getting a little less.
Yes.
Like the smile on your face isn't matching the smile, isn't matching the heart right now. Yeah, that's because we're getting a little closer to, am I not good under there? And we're getting a little closer to, like the mind is this thing moving all the time and it wants to be really happy, right? So it goes and it does stuff so people like me and this will be fun, and it's trying to be happy all the time, right? Like I was explaining earlier about the happiness on stilts. And then what we're doing now is we're sort of pulling out the rug from underneath it, right? And when we do that, it's like, what can I rely on for happiness now? And it starts to get a little uncomfortable. I don't know where to go then. If I can't go to being that safe, that's safe. If I can't go to that safe place, then it's uncomfortable, right? So that's what's starting to happen now. You're noticing the fake stuff, and it's getting uncomfortable.
Always.
Yeah, it's getting uncomfortable. So that's really good. That you gotta see that. Let it be uncomfortable and not know where to go or what to do for happiness. Yeah, let it see that. Yeah, let it see that struggle. That's very, very good. You know that when we're busy thinking, we're actually distracting ourselves from how we feel. We're using thinking as a method to try to avoid seeing that we're uncomfortable, that we're suffering. I don't know if I believe that. Is that true? That's hiding from your suffering. Right? That's thinking is an escape because inside we're all unsatisfied, unfulfilled, and it's uneasy in there. And so we move out to stories, thoughts, understanding conceptually, television, our phones, our devices, to hide the fact that we're uncomfortable. So some of your uncomfort, a hiding space for you is in the safeness of, that. And so when you see it, you can start to see the truth of suffering. You start to see the uncomfort in there. So that's good. That's getting closer to reality. Yeah.